Welcome to Rockwall Small Engine, and today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks about riding bikes. I know it seems a little silly, but you know, when you're riding a bicycle to a motorcycle, there are things that you should definitely know, and some tricks that'll definitely help you when you're out on the road, or when you're out on the sidewalk, or if you're just out on the dirt. So, would you like to tune in? And we'll go over a couple things, and we'll have a good time doing it. Now, I have absolutely nothing against four wheels. As you can see, I have a Toyota pickup behind me. It needs some work, but you know what? It's my baby. But on the other hand, I have a lot of babies. Colorado is a fun state because in December, January, you get a lot of snow, sometimes. And if you're stuck on two wheels, that sucks. No doubt about it. But there are some things you can do, surprisingly. Skis, ice-studded tires, or you could just break down and get a snowmobile if you really want the experience. But realistically, I have nothing against four wheels, but two wheels ring a bell that I call to. So my story with bikes, it mostly begins with my mom pushing me down a hill, a really big hill at the time, well, being a kid, you know. And I just had to survive to learn how to ride. As a kid, you know, I mean, now looking back, it wasn't that scary, but instilled with me like a rush. I'd say like a rush that I would only get again when I would get back into it and get my first motorcycle, my TW200. But it also flourished when I got a sport bike, well, touring bike, as in my FZ1. It was a 2005 Yamaha FZ1, and it was a blast. I went from my TW200 for a couple years, just slow as can be, to just finally I could go fast on my 1000cc. And you know what? Looking back on it, I probably should have got a 600. I probably should have got a 600. But you know what? It worked out. And I've since moved on. Now I have an FZ8. And that FZ8 is a really nice bike. I love it. It's got low miles and it's quiet. It's pretty good on fuel. And what I like about it the most is the comfort. It's very comfortable, and it's an inconspicuous bike. Yamaha FZs are a little bit of a golden egg because they're comfortable. They're fast enough. You know, there are faster bikes, but the FZs are reasonably fast. And the best thing about them is the fan base, or should I say the lack of. My biggest problem with motorcycles is mostly the people that ride them. Sometimes it's the bike, but most of the time, excuse me, most of the time the issues mainly are of the rider. And I mean that whether it's an accident or whether it's a mishap mechanically or whether anything like that, most of the time it's the owner's fault. Maybe a lack of maintenance schedule or you know, overriding their bike. Some people override their bikes, and what I mean by that is when you go 160 plus miles an hour on the interstate continually for, you know, a couple times, or I should say a couple times a week, you can expect your rear tire to blow out quick, your engine to be going through its fluids more, where you're going to have to be changing your oil a lot more frequently, and it's just overall more wear and tear on the bike versus going, slightly above the speed limit. I'd say 90 to 110 is reasonable, but you can go over that if it's a straight line and everything's safe, no cop. But man, I gotta say, low speed biking is underrated, very much so. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, when they get into motorcycling, they begin on, say, a 600cc sport bike or a 500. And to be frank with you, it's good that they are getting into cycling. But on the other hand, I believe that when you're learning on a smaller bike, you have accidents at lower speeds, and you enjoy biking for what biking is and not for just the speed of it and the thrill. That's an important thing. If you're riding for the speed and the thrill, expect a couple broken bones and expect to go through your bikes. But if you relax and try to enjoy riding at a speed that you won't die at, or at least a speed that, your mom would approve of. I mean, depends on your mom, I guess, but you get my point. If you ride to ride and not to die, you're gonna be all right. And the biggest thing, my parents were very upset with me when I believe I first got my bike, but they realized, especially with me riding my TW, and I'm riding, and I've been riding for quite some time now, and I haven't been in too terrible of accidents. And what I mean by that is I haven't dropped off at over 100. And that's important because I've met a lot of people who have, and I can only imagine. And you can write down in the comments your experiences about crashing on motorcycles and just in general, and I'd love to hear about it. But another thing that interests me on this topic is going from motorcycles back to bicycles. It's a very weird sensation, especially if you've been riding for a while and then you hop on a bicycle to have to pedal to get your own speed. You're just wishing that you could just twist the handle, and just go. But nope. But you know what? There's a certain simplicity about it that I can appreciate, and also that I can enjoy, especially, not to shout out too much, but this is a Sun Cruiser bike. Believe it or not, these are pretty nice, $500 to $600 range when they were new cruisers. When I was around 14, 15, me and my dad were into buying bicycles, and I spent $25 on this bike. And it was the best $25 I ever spent. It has been a perfect bike. It rides like a dream, like an orange dreamsicle, I can tell you. It floats across the driveway, and you can sway on it. You can just relax. And the best thing about it is it weighs almost nothing. It's a full aluminum frame, and it weighs, I can pick it up with my pinky. It's very light, which makes it nimble. And that's my one problem with cruiser bikes, especially like those Walmart bikes, the Huffies, or whatever they're called. Man, that's what I started on. That was my first motorcycle. Would you like to see it? This is my first bike, Huffy No Luso. I purchased this probably, let's just say a while ago. It would have been like post 2015 era, maybe that era. But anyways, what's important about it is it's a very simple steel framed cruiser that I put a lot of miles on. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. Continually, when I was growing up, this was my I would say daily before I had my license, and I'd take it to school. I'd take it all over the place, and it very much proved its paces, and it's a very durable frame. I think it's a wonderful bike, and also it can be modified very easily with those eBay, like they're basically little moped kits where you can put a 50cc or 100cc little engine on it. You can see in here, if we move in, right there is the frame mount for the engine. So the engine kind of sits right here, and as you can see, the chain is over there. It's kind of mangled up. It hasn't been a rideable bike in a while, I must admit, but you know what, it served its purpose, and now it's an ornament, and I will someday get to modifying it again and maybe putting a hotter engine on it and actually getting the chain and sprocket running and going again. That would be a fun project, but for now it's a history lesson in the making. This is my Cannondale Delta V2000. I checked the serial number. It's probably around 92 to 93 last time I checked. Of course, it's been a few years, but yeah, this is the original colors. And actually, the Cannondale logo was neon orange, the same color as the shock, but unfortunately has since faded. I will eventually get to maybe getting the right paint or just have my sister paint it, honestly, but the previous owner loved this bike. You can kind of tell, like, if I go to right here, you can see on the forks it's painted. I don't know how well that is to see. And it's got designs on it, and from what I found nothing. Previous owner, I bought this off of eBay, so I don't know. I bought this as a frame, and I did basically just my dad had a bike. It was a Cannondale Delta V, I think it was a 1000 or something. I could be mistaken, but it was a different sort of Delta. Similar features, but I took the brakes off of it. It has Sun Tour rim brakes, which, you know, that's for its era, but this was a very nice bike when it was new. Like, hats down to the designers at Cannondale in Colorado, not to mention. I really like this bike, and as you can see, it has the rear rack, kind of ugly, but it was functional, kind of. I was in Denver for a while in an apartment, and this was what I brought with me just to ride around, but I only rode it once, unfortunately. But I had it with me because I really like these bikes. They're just beautiful to me, and they also have the rear suspension like that where it's in the back. It's kind of right at your butt, and I don't know why, but it has a weird bouncy. It's not quite a pogo stick. It's like a rough pogo stick. Like if you were to put a pogo stick and just make it really hard, that's what it feels like. But again, it's kind of early developmental full suspension on these bikes. It also has the infamous or famous, depending on who you are, head shock. I enjoy it, I like it, but at the same time, I do have to pump it up. If you go underneath, you take the wheel off. Underneath here, in between the forks, there is a Schrader valve, and you get a high pressure fork pump. I mean, they're kind of cheap, but I mean, you can get a nice one, but I just get a cheap one. Pump it up. I forgot what I put it at. I think I usually set it at around maybe like 80 to 85 psi, but it depends on like what I'm doing with it. But if I'm just filling it up, probably 80. But honestly, I like it. It's pretty linear and also has its pros and cons, but I just like the design of it and the way it looks. That was a lot of talk about bicycles, wasn't it? All right, well, the meat and potatoes of the operation here has to do with something like this. This is my FZ8. It's 2013. I bought it with, I believe it was somewhere around 3,000 miles, and now I have around 7,000 something. The previous mysterious owner put Hayabusa forks and front brakes on this. So, yeah, and it's got a custom windscreen. It's got an R1 rear shock, because quoted from the previous owner, the FZ8 stock rear suspension was very much like a pogo stick. So, that's different. A couple of other changes that I did, I mean, I added a battery tender and put new tires on it. But aside from that, I love this bike. It's a quality machine. Being an 800, I would say everything past around 7,000 RPM is a little bit extra than like an FZ6 or something. But in all honesty, if you're going to be getting an FZ, I'd get either a FZ6 or an FZ1. The reason why I say this is because this bike right here is a cult classic. So I'm telling you this, stay away from it, because they're all for me. I'm going to get all these because I love these bikes, and they didn't make too many of them. They only did them for a certain amount of years, but in all honesty, I love the rarity of it, as well as just the uniqueness about it, because I haven't seen very many other people that ride FZ8s. The headlight on it is the original headlight from my TW200, which is currently in the shed right behind us. Right now I'm working on some other issues with it, but I love these bikes. Now, on to the next part. Let's start with sport bikes. So, when it comes to tips and tricks, there's a lot. But one of the biggest tricks that I personally have found are little ones, like a center stand. The FZ8 and the FZ series, some FZ6s don't, and most owners remove them, unfortunately, but the center stand is very nice, because this bike also has a regular kickstand, so don't worry, if you need it, it's there. But center stands allow you to move the rear wheel on the road. Now that's important for adjusting your chain, because these do, go out of adjustment, to just simple things like getting the chain back on if it got too loose suddenly and you need to put it back on. So it's very nice, as well as for changing the tire and just for general maintenance. It's just a wonderful, beautiful thing. So if you're looking for a bike, especially if you're planning on doing the work yourself, I would highly advise getting a bike with a center stand. If you're going to be doing touring and just general road stuff, but if you're going to be doing track, of course, no, don't. That's dangerous. But you get what I'm saying. For just general purpose and for having an all-around bike, having a center stand is actually very nice. Number 2, do not get a bike with clip-on handlebars if you are over 6 foot. I'm just going to let it sink in, because this bike, the FZ8, has dirt bike handlebars, or at least you can put dirt bike handlebars on it. That's what's kind of on it right now. The FZ1 had that. The FZ6 has that. You run into a lot of FZs that maybe the owners put clip-on bars for some reason, but you know what? If they're racing them, that's one thing, but if you're racing, clip-on bars are glorious. But if you're riding and just doing a long distance riding, they're not very comfortable at all. And like I said, especially if you're over 6 foot. However, when you pair that with a comfortable seat height where I can kind of stretch my legs just a little bit, it's a very good combo. But if you're, like I said, if you're over 6 foot, stay away from clip-on bars if you're planning on riding your bike. If you're tracking it, that's different, but like we were saying. But another thing is windshields. If you stare at me riding down with my big windshield and you stare at my shirt, it's lightly throbbing like this. But if you see like that guy with a backpack, no helmet, and glasses busting down the highway at 120 and he's got no windshield, his shirt is just violently rippling and it's not really uncomfortable, but you can literally see the difference that a windshield can do, especially when I ride with other riders. I can just look down at my shirt and look at the other riders. I'm like, wow, there's not as much wind here. That's important, mainly for, I'd say, just comfort in general, because just rippling your shirt, it untucks your shirt, like if you are driving dressed up. It's just, a windshield is nice. It's nice. And also in the rain too. It blocks your phone if you have a mount. It blocks rain from coming at it, which is nice. Another thing that sport bikes should have, if you're going to get one, especially for your first, quality crash bars. These right here, as you can see, I've seen a couple of incidents. It wraps around to the other side like that. This is a very strong crash bar. I haven't laid this bike down at over any speed, but the laydowns in parking lots and stuff, it saves it. And this is already a naked bike, so there's no plastic in this region anyways. But if you are going to be practicing stunting in any way or doing anything like that, get a very good solid set of crash bars. Mandatory. If you want your plastics to stay plastic, get a pair of crash bars. You can get frame sliders if you really can't afford it. That's better than nothing. But frame sliders, and if you're not familiar, it would be just like a piece of metal coming out to here, extending out to here. And those are good, but they don't protect these lower components of the engine. And they also just in general can be kind of hard on your frame when you do crash with them. But I will say, check your chain. Check your chain always. If your chain is loose and you go out for just a spin, it can end very badly. I had one incident where my chain came off and it locked up my rear wheel and I skidded to a stop before a semi-truck skidded to a stop right behind me, and that could have been terrible. Luckily, I swerved to the left and he did pass me, but if I wasn't looking at my mirror, that would have been terrible. So always keep a good eye at your chain and brakes as well. Just every now and then test them. Every ride, before you ride, test them. And also just make sure you look at your rotors and especially your forks. Make sure your forks aren't leaking. Because as you can see, if your fork in your front starts leaking, which will leak down here, it can leak onto your rear or your front brake. And that is no bueno. You can lose control very easily. It can also leak onto your front wheel and you can lose control that way as well. But if you keep good condition of your fork seals, clean your bike often, and also don't really go on dirt roads, especially if you got a sport bike and you don't have guards around that area, highly recommend just cleaning them and to make sure that nothing really gets up in there to tear it apart, and also to replace them when they need to be replaced. Forks aren't too terrible to do as far as yourself. You just need to have a way to lift the bike up and hold it up. All right, and always check your throttle too to make sure it doesn't stick, because if your throttle sticks, ear in the sticks. Alrighty, on to the next part. Alright, so that was a lot of talk from me. Let's go ahead and hand off this microphone to my sister and see what she has to say on this matter.
Hey, I'm Brooke. I'm Oliver's sister, and I guess I'll talk my story about how I got into motorcycles. I was kind of into them, but I just never figured out how to ride them, and I just didn't feel like I had the confidence to ride them. So one random Tuesday or Wednesday, I was my brother was fixing up the TW, and he told me, he's like, you should learn how to ride. And I was like, you know what, why not? And we have so much open space, so I was like, I won't really hit anything. So I was just like, you know what, why not take that leap? So I started off on his TW, and I stalled a lot because I wasn't really familiar with the clutch and how quickly or how slowly you need to let it out. So I stalled a lot, and I eventually got the hang of it and how much pressure you need for it, and so I started riding that more and more in the field, and then I started in our neighborhood on private roads and stuff, and then I didn't get on public road till a month or two since I started riding. And in the meantime, I also learned how to ride his FZ8, which is a lot faster and a lot more touchier clutch. So I rode it for the first time, his FZ8, and I started to fall in love with it because it's this freeing feeling you get from riding, and it's just very freeing. And I just, I fell in love with it, and I kept on riding his FZ8. I rode the TW here and there, but I just kept riding the FZ8, and I then eventually moved on to public roads and other traffic. I was scared at first, but I really got the hang of it, and I fell in love with it. And my brother, he kept on complaining how much I was putting mileage on his FZ8, so I was like, I think it's about time I get, my own bike. And I ended up getting a FZ6. It's the best thing I ever got. I think FZs are so slept on, and there's so much beauty to this bike. It is in rough shape. It was used. It's in 2005. I got it for a pretty good price from some guy off Facebook, and I had to do some things because I was planning on getting my motorcycle license, and in order to do that, and if you want to bring your own bike, you're gonna have to make sure your bike passes inspections. So there was a lot I needed to do in order to fix this up so it passes T-clocks. So one of the first things I started with was I think I changed the oil was one of the first things I did with it, and it did not have front blinkers. So my brother helped me out, and I actually learned a lot of electrical from him. So I learned how to solder and find wires and read wiring diagrams and stuff. The FZ6 the manual helped me out so much about it, but I ended up figuring out the wires that will connect the blinkers and make them work. So I added the front blinkers, and I'm eventually going to change the headlight for it because the headlight is very cheap. It's just the one it came with, and I'm trying to get the stock FZ6 headlights, a triangle, but my odometer had a crack in it, causing water and condensation to build up in there, and it worked when I first got it, but when I was doing the wiring for it, all the wiring for the gauge clusters and blinkers, I noticed that it stopped working. It wouldn't light up, it wouldn't show anything. So I had to ask some questions about it to, people who knew these bikes, but I figured the only thing I can really do is cut it open. It wasn't any loose wires connecting the gauge cluster, so I had to open it up, and obviously it was wet inside. There's a lot of water in it, so I put it in rice, the gauge cluster. Still didn't work. Looked at the circuit board, cleaned some of the fried parts because, again, the water did fry some of the circuit board, so I ended up trying to clean some of it, and it still wouldn't work. So I ended up having to buy a whole new gauge cluster, which was pretty pricey, but in the meantime it was really worth it because this one works better than my old one. So it didn't have mirrors when I got it, so I had to add some mirrors. I kind of have like a purple aesthetic going on, so I added purple grips and mirrors, and I spray painted my odometer. And another thing that was wrong with it was the oil pump cover. It had a crack at the bottom, so it didn't leak oil too much, but it was like it wouldn't pass T-clocks for my inspection. So I ended up having to get a whole new oil pump cover, just the cover. Nothing inside was damaged. Obviously this bike has been dropped. It is used. So I am gonna eventually get crash bars for it because these ones are from the old owner and they're pretty beat up. So some of the bike has some scratches on it, including the tank, but it's nothing like, leaking. I also, my foot peg, I was trying to change my foot pegs out, and as I was taking out the old one, my bracket broke. So we tried JB welding it, and it didn't work. So I ended up having to buy a whole new foot peg. But the other side, they don't match. There's different foot pegs, but I don't really want to change it out and risk breaking another bracket. Anyways, again, I'm shocked the tires were in really good condition, and a lot of this bike, because I think this bike has around 40,000 miles on it, which is a lot. It's from 2005, but for the amount of miles on this bike, it's in spectacular condition, and the price I paid for it was great. I didn't, have to rob a bank for it, but it's just a well-built bike, and it's not uncomfortable. It doesn't have, the handlebars that are down to here. It's a comfortable bike. I don't like to be hanging over the gas tank. I like to have a little wiggle room when I'm riding, and it's fast. It's an FZ6. It's a 600cc, but I started off on an 800, my brother's FZ8, so it was a little bit hard to jump down to a 600, but I couldn't really tell. And once I became more comfortable with this bike, I prefer it over the FZ8. It's, again, I love this bike. It's really well built, and I will probably always have this bike, and I will get more bikes later down the road, but this is just a well built bike, and I think more people need to look into these bikes because it's a good, it is a little fast for beginners, which I am a beginner, so I am careful on it, and you have to be careful because bikes come with risk. You choose that risk when you ride, but knowing the risk you take and knowing your skill level, you'll be okay. You will have some crashes here and there, that always happens, but I just think you need a bike that really fits you, and for me this bike fits me. It really does, and it will probably be my first and last bike for me, so I think that's it.
So what about dirt bikes, bicycles, the rest? Mountain bikes, downhill bikes, country, cross country. What about those? Well, in my opinion, if your bike is touching the trail or even, motocross track, you have to not only trust your bike, but you also have to know your bike. And what I mean by that is you have to really get to know it and work on it and trust it. go around the neighborhood a bunch of times before you even think about touching the street for the first time on a bike, even if it's brand new. There's just things, if you buy a bike, especially from, you could say Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, the ads, you're going to probably get a mystery box of problems. You don't know, but there's probably problems. And, everything's not just a cherry cake, so you got to eat it, and you got to make sure you keep safe with it. But especially, you can apply that to bicycles as well. If you don't know your bicycle and you're doing, say, commuting on, say you live in a city and you're commuting on your bicycle, if you don't know how to fix your chain if it comes off, or maybe, how to fix a flat, that's a simple one. Not many people these days know how to actually change their front tire, rear tire. They just always take it to the shop. But when you're actually on the trail, to have the satisfaction of fixing your flat, of fixing your chain, maybe, I don't know, something happens to your bars and you know what I mean. You do stuff to your bike and you get home on it. Or you get to the destination that you were trying to get to, and that's a satisfying feeling. That's a very satisfying feeling. And sometimes there are in-betweens where you can't, where I've had, particularly, not to throw shade on them, but Kawasaki Ninjas, EX 250s, the 250s, everyone probably started on one, I bet, but those, I just didn't want to put the time into it, but the carburetor was always leaking gas, and most importantly, it was just kind of a fun bike to ride, but a terrible bike to work on, in my opinion. Everything came out easy. There wasn't really any trouble with it. It was just, I didn't like it. I didn't like the design. I'm not saying Kawasaki doesn't make good bikes, the Versus and, the KX 500s of the 90s and stuff, but I'm just saying, personally speaking, that sort of direction. Also, I'll mention mopeds, scooters. Oh, man. You guys are missing out if you are throwing shade at them. Oh, if you're throwing shade on scooters, you haven't ridden one. You haven't smiled on one. Because if you're riding, I don't care if it's one of those Honda Elite 150s, spaceship design. I don't care if it's one of those or not. It puts a smile on your face, dude. I know I would say my first motorcycle, if you want to call it that, was a Honda Metropolitan. I actually don't like to count it as it because, I considered it more of a tractor. Because we towed on it, we would do all sorts of fun things with it. And to be honest with you, that thing, when it left this property, it was still running. The CV motor in that, or the CV transmission in that, it was rugged. And also, it's a little tiny liquid-cooled 50cc. So, it was a while ago, but if I was there today, I'd probably put power onto it because, it's 50cc. You could just light her up, and it's liquid-cooled, so it could take it. But I'm just saying, don't hate on scooters. Don't do it. Because if you find yourself smiling on one, you're going to feel awfully bad. You're going to feel awfully mad, man. Because, man, I just want to get it across to you. Ride a scooter for the first time. If you have a friend that has one, it's so much fun. And if you're commuting on one, if you're in, a college town, Denver City, kind of like what we have, scooter is the way to go, man. Great gas mileage, costs like $5 to fill your tank. It's ridiculous, and it's so much fun. I mean, obviously, I would see myself more on something like one of these, but scooters, don't hate on them. But My biggest thing in this whole video is I want to get across to you a message that, there are many tips and tricks I could have went down. This whole video, it just went on rabbit hole after rabbit hole. But in all honesty, I don't feel I have to, because the biggest tip and trick I can give you in, cycling is going to be the cycle itself. If you focus on the cycle itself, you're going to be happy, and you're going to be appreciating it for what it is, or you're going to be hating it for what it is, and you're going to be in pain because you got something you maybe didn't like, now that you got to know it, or just something of a bad design. There are many. I'm not going to name names, but there are many bikes out there that are bad. B-A-D. Bad. If you're going to get one of those, I'd say like a Chinese-made dirt bike you find on Amazon, or like, just in general, something you find, one of those generic name Chinese brands, don't get it unless it's a steal, because they are awful, and they just have terrible assembly of it. It feels like they are built just to a shame. The orange bike, which I was sitting down with earlier, that is a Baja Dirt Runner 125. It's actually kind of a Goldilocks of them. That's why I don't want to say naming names, because what I feel is trash, some guy may have found for a cheap price and is getting a great use out of it. And in my case, the Baja Dirt Runner, it's a friend's bike, but they basically bought it for really cheap, like a few $100, and then I put like a little bit of time into it, changed the oil, did a little bit of this, a little bit of that, painted it, just a spray paint, but the little I did changed the course of that bike's, entire lineage, because it was about to get thrown away. It was about to get absolutely dumpstered, but we saved it, and we made it worth it. And honestly, I don't have any before and after pictures, unfortunately, but that's why good deals are good deals. So if you're on Facebook Marketplace and you're looking for a cheap bike, I highly recommend going on and looking for a project bike, because you can learn on it. Because if you buy something for a really good deal that's in pieces, just make sure it has a clean title. That's all I say. If it has a clean title, you're good to go. But spend the time to rebuild the bike, because it's not that hard. Bikes are incredibly easy to work on and easy to learn on, because like instead of a car that has maybe 4 to 8 cylinders, this has 1. And instead of taking 5-6 quarts of oil, it takes 1 quart of oil. So if you make a mistake and you have to dump the oil, it's like you're only spending in my case, like $10 to $15 if you're getting the nice oil, or less if you're getting it in bulk. But I'm just saying, you can easily change your oil, open the engine back up, do what you need to do, and you're not draining a dump load of oil, which is good. But that's the thing. If you're getting into biking, or you already are, and you're looking for just little tips and tricks, or you just find this video entertaining, I think the best thing to do is to just keep riding. Go outside. Get on your bike. Why don't you start it up and go for a ride? How about it? Have you done it in a while? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But why don't you go out there and ride? Because that is the heart and soul of it, to be on 2 wheels.